Well, hello there, Whiskers. Welcome to the fourth book in the Dark Tower series, Wizard and Glass. Now, usually I would say let's just skip over genre. Usually I would say let's just skip over the genre. We're 4 books deep at this point. It's not going to change. But of course, the Dark Tower is nothing if not a different series of books. And the genre does change. We were sort of in this dystopian old world, and now our path takes a sharp turn back into the western of the first book, back into that world, and strange twisted idea of the old west, old wild west, with a dash of magic thrown in. And unfortunately, this veering off the path of the beam, it does some things to the style and pacing and the tension here. So we spend about 80% of this book in the Wild West, and it's not as if our characters teleport there. It's a story Roland's telling, and there's sort of no tension to the story. The main characters of the story Roland is telling is a girl he was in love with. We know she's not here because Roland is alone. We know Cuthbert and Ellen have died long ago, so there's not really much tension there. It's spoiled from the beginning. And if you're somebody who hates spoilers, I don't know that you'd enjoy it. Like, the mystery and everything is fun, but we already know how it ends. We are in the end. And it also does not seem quite relevant to what's happening right now. Might be that it will build in future, but right now the story doesn't matter. As a standalone story, let's take it as not part of the Dark Tower, but just a standalone story, Roland's story from the Wild West. 4 stars. I do think it's good, it's really interesting, I like the Wild West, but the pacing does really drag near the end. The mystery is solved and it just kind of pulls its corpse along for a while until we get the great big battle at the end. So it's pretty, I'd say, paint by numbers structure wise, and then just a too long stretch between the mini climax and then the big climax at the end. There's just too long stretch of that in between. Too much rounding out of edges done there before the true end of the story. That it's just get on with it now. So, getting into sugar and vinegar. Sugar is definitely the interconnectedness of things. So right now, Roland's story, there's not been much foreshadowing. He hasn't been seeing ghosts of the past. But maybe he will. Maybe in the next book, he soon will be seeing characters from that past coming back. I really hope so, because these interconnectedness of things is really the thing that I enjoyed the most, and other aspects of the story that are interconnected like that I love. But I need for Roland's story to not just be a flash in the dark. I need to have it link up into everything else as well. Just like this new version of New York that we step into has aspects of our life that we can look onto, but twisted, broken, different. It's intertextual in that we are living in 2 different worlds, 2 different times at the same time. And I really enjoy that. I enjoy kind of the absurdism of universes clashing and mixing and getting destroyed because time is broken, something is broken, and I really still like that idea. So I will continue to like these books as long as that idea remains strong and well thought out, which I think it still does here. There's a lot of expectations now leading up to the next book for that aspect specifically. And then the vinegar. This is a trigger warning for sexual assault. And the vinegar is the portrayal of it. So right now we have, in the whole story, both timelines, we have 2 female characters, both of whom have suffered sexual assault of some kind. Um, both of whom are named Susanna. So we'll just do like black-haired Susanna and blonde Susanna, since I think that's probably the easiest way to differentiate them. So black-haired Susanna in the previous book got violently raped, and at the end of the previous book she was concerned that she was carrying a demon spawn in her stomach. She was scared that she was pregnant, and it never comes up again. Like, did she stop caring, or no? Actually, I think I do know what the problem is. We don't really get to go into her thoughts that often. So, maybe she cares, but we don't get to see that. And then the portrayal again, which I will get into in the spoiler section in this book, it's just, it treats sexual assault like it's just not a big deal. And it's difficult because you don't want to write a story that says that sexual assault victims are just that, and they will never be able to survive, and they will never be able to move on, and they will be intrinsically and forever scarred by this. No, that's not the truth. But also, it's not just something a handsome boy can kiss away. Like, this is... I think there's a line between making it life-ending and just not a big deal. As easy to forget as a cold. And I think this book is very heavily swayed on, like, sexual assault is not a big deal. We're just gonna have it happen to all the female characters in some way or another, and they're not gonna talk or think or anything. Let's just move it along. They don't care about it. And I really don't like that. It makes me sort of uncomfortable to read it like that, because it's sort of, the act itself is like fetishized and dealt with, and then the trauma afterwards, we just, nah. Yeah, I really don't like that. It's difficult to describe because it's definitely a sort of a attitude that's coming through about the importance of trauma after sexual assault. So it's difficult to describe in words. Yes, I would still recommend this book, even though there are some issues with it. This world and this story has still done more than enough to draw me in, and if you enjoyed the last book, you will definitely enjoy this one. It's still not my new favorite, like I knew a lot of people were expecting it to be. Drawing of the Three is still like top tier. That is my favorite. This book, 4 stars. It's still just more of what I had expected from a really good series, but it didn't blow me away. So yeah, there are some that could make the argument that this book has a little bit of that sagging middle effect. I don't feel like that. The stakes are definitely still up there, and it's a quest. No one said the road to the Dark Tower would be as straight as the beam, and I'm sort of fine with taking a couple of steps back, tripping, falling, and struggling along the way there. So, yeah. So, as I said, we spend most of this book in Roland's past. There are 2 things that can come of this. Obviously now we sort of have 2 stories and 2 sets of characters to deal with. I'm not going to go into the plot of the past timeline too much. It's not super important. The characters there are, but yeah, not the plot specifically. I was concerned when reading this other timeline, this past Roland, that we might get a substantial, malleable motivation for Roland to seek the tower. Like, the tower stole his long-lost love and he thinks she's trapped in there. And I'm so happy that didn't happen. Roland's yearning, undeniable force towards the tower, it's still there. It's still unexplained. It's still miraculous and impossible and as straight and narrow as the beam. They did not explain that. Roland just discovers his yearning for the tower. And there's no real reason for it. It's Ka. It's the unknowable, and I really love that for his character. I don't want to know why Roland wants the tower so badly, because I kind of feel like there can't be a good enough reason. It's just like destiny or fate or instinct or something. It can't be something emotional that doesn't suit his character. It can't be something plot driven, because it'll feel like a contrivance, and we can all think of like 50 other ways that he could have gotten around this. I really like that it is just Ka. It is the wind. It is just who Roland is. It was who he was born to be. I like that it remains unknowable and unexplained. So, getting into characters, let's start with the characters from the story of Roland's past, the bulk of this book. They're 14. And I know I always do this when talking about young characters, but this is what 14-year-old boys look like. Can we just... So on the one hand, his love for Susanna, his impulsiveness, all of that makes sense. He's 14 years old. I understand, from a boy like this makes sense. Why does everybody in the town treat them like men? Why are they not going through the awkwardness of puberty? I mean, they're 14. Their voices should be breaking, and they should be awkward, and pimples, and body hair, and like, they're 14. I don't know. Definitely between the ages of like 12 and 15, that's when the biggest changes happens, especially like in boys and girls. By 17, like, I understand that's practically like a small man, but 14 is more a child than a man. So I did not completely understand why everyone immediately had so much respect for Roland and his friends. I don't know if Gilead is like pumping them full of hormones or something, but these boys do not act like boys most of the time. As for the other two, Ellen and Cuthbert, they weren't dull, but neither were they overly interesting. They were fine. They did not act like children. I think Cuthbert's childhood would have been a lot more like Eddie's, a lot more insecurity. They just seem way too sure of themselves. They have not been tried and tested like Roland has. They should not even be out here. So if I closed my eyes and ignored their ages, I think I would have no problem with their characters whatsoever. But like, spend some time with a 14-year-old and then tell me whether you think this is how they would act. No. No. Roland, as a character, is a 14-year-old kid with the personality of this world-wise warrior. He's very stoic and a great leader and seems to never go wrong. But then when he does make mistakes, they're not childish or naive mistakes. They're sort of just mistakes. They're not something that could be attributed to his age, which the story tries to do. But I don't think they're childish mistakes to make. They're not from naivete. He definitely thinks ahead and suspects people of treachery and treason and things. So yeah. And then there's another interesting thing, which is like, I find pretty often in books about like coming of age for boys, apparently once a man has had sex with one woman, he will never be nervous in front of a pretty girl ever again. Somebody please go tell the world that this is so. I mean, he meets the most beautiful girl in the world. He's 14 years old and he doesn't stutter. He's just like pure charm. And I'm sorry, I just think that type of charm comes with age. It's not it's not something that you get from like spending one night in a horse bed. So that's an interesting kind of trope that I've picked up on, that they do to a lot of young male protagonists. It's like, he's always nervous in front of women, has one woman, done. All that nerve's gone. He now has the personality and the charm of a 25-year-old player. Like, just something that I thought was interesting about him. Okay, so let's talk about his love interest and probably the other main character of this story, since we get a lot of point of view from her perspective. And that's Susanna, a 15-year-old, beautiful, blonde haired girl. Um, and she's written a lot more realistically 15. Um, she's unsure, she's naive, she gets manipulated by older people in her life. She's in an impossible situation. And as I mentioned, she's also sexually assaulted. And it's sort of like the whole scene of her having virginity tests and things like that. It's so dramatic and stretched out, and it was like horrific enough to read. But then we also have to have that woman going, taking her through this process, sexually assault her on top of that. And it was just a lot too much for me. Um, I think the whole experience would have been traumatic without that added evil element to it. And then she feels bad and dirty about it, like for 5 minutes on her walk home. And then she meets Roland and he kisses her, and now she feels all better. And that's just like, it, it just makes light of something that I really felt horrible reading about. I wasn't even there, and it stayed with me longer than it stayed with her. So it was just like not very realistic and not fun to read. I think I wouldn't go so far as to call it fetishization, but I definitely think this scene was taken a lot too far. There was no reason for it plot wise, there was no reason for it character wise because it doesn't influence her. So I kind of wish it just wasn't there. And then their romance is a little bit weird to me because Susanna does act like a 15-year-old girl. She is manipulated, she is nervous and impulsive, and everything that comes with that ripe young age. It's sort of weird to have her romance with Roland, who canonically should be younger than her, but acts like a 25-year-old, like acts like a full grown adult, and sometimes like a world weary old soldier, like 45, 50, pushing it. So it's sometimes weird to have his very experienced feel next to her very young feel. Like, sort of makes the romance feel a little bit weird. Okay, so then heading back to the present, let's have a quick look at those characters. As I said, we don't spend that much time with them. I will say Eddie and Jake remain mostly the same, but Jake is allowed to shed his brave face from time to time, and we see him being scared. We see him being a young boy. Um, he actually feels sometimes like he is still a young boy and not just like a man thrown into this. And I did like that. It made him feel a touch more human to me. And then Susanna. I was really disappointed by the handling of Susanna. Um, so she's supposed to be Odetta and Detta Walker mixed into one to become Susanna Dean, but all of that edge, all of that interesting has been washed away. She is never violent, she's never scared, she's never aggressive like that. She's just calm like the sea. And it's just the Detta Walker part is just, it's gone. And that fight I really missed in her. Also, the pregnancy thing. So, it would have been really interesting to go with her through that arc, through maybe having a demon child inside of her, through wondering whether or not to tell Eddie. Um, Dealing with her trauma obviously would have been something I would have appreciated. Just like saying that it will be hard, but you will be okay. That type of message. But also, like, if we know in this world, in the world of the Dark Tower, time is different here, and they keep saying that, and there's a different version of New York here, would it not have come to her mind to think, maybe I'm late because time is different here? Maybe like this version of New York can have a pregnancy test so I can find out. But she doesn't think about herself at all. All she thinks about is the tower and the next mystery, and it's just, she feels very hollow, and I was really disappointed by that. Okay, so let's start with the present plot first. So, there's not much to tell because it's only like 20% of the story. But they defeat Blaine, obviously, as if anybody thought they were just gonna die on the train. Not much of a cliffhanger if you ask me. But they defeat Blaine, and I really like how they do it. They trick a machine by using something essentially human. They use humor to trick him. And they use Eddie, who's always like looked down upon and called stupid, and he gets to make silly jokes and make the train explode. And I really love that. Then they get into the different New York that's been hit by this terrible virus, and I loved that. And then we go into the past, which I will get to. And then they find ruby slippers on the road. And I also love that. Again, intertextuality, but here we don't have to hear the story. We already know the story. And then immediately at the back of your mind is like, who's going to be the lion? Who's going to be the Tin Man? Who's going to be, like, you're already putting the pieces together and trying to solve the mystery because you know the story. You already have all the clues. It's like cultural clues. I think any person living in Western society knows the story of Dorothy and the Yellow Brick Road and the Wizard of Oz. So I really loved that. So I am so happy with how this book ended because I am thinking about yeah. So I really love that. Okay. And then we are back on the path to the beam. And I'm still wondering whether this Wizard of Oz story is going to get involved again. And I'm so keen to find out. So then let's talk about the story from the past. More or less, it's a Western mystery thriller with a lot of political intrigue. And it was good. Interesting characters, good, simple world. And we learn a lot about Roland. How he caused the death of his first love, how he killed his own mother. And as I said, I really love that we don't get an explanation for why he's looking for the tower. He just is, and he just has to, and he's always been like that. It just sort of emphasizes again Roland as this unmovable force, this constant ticking clock towards the tower. That is who he is. That's what he was born to be. And the idea of Ka really surrounds him, and I like it. I like it a lot. I really want this history to be useful, other than Roland's characterization. I want it to come up later, in the next book. I want there to be the Croon and Susanna and like whispers of them coming in. I want the intertextuality to be there because we spent all this time learning about this legend, hearing this story. I want it to matter. Thinking back, I sort of felt the same way about Jake's involvement in the previous book, and that ended up better than I could have expected. So I am reserving judgment for now, but I really like the story in itself, and I really like the story of the Dark Tower. I just need them to mix a bit more. And this story is iconic. Phrases like char you tree and come reap are just, they mean so much. And I don't know if they're just iconic phrases or if it's the story that links them together that makes them iconic, but it's special. This series is really something special. Okay, Whiskers. So, I am super keen to read the comments down below. I'm sure, as with every Dark Tower book, there will be a lot of you talking to me, especially about my little wavering theories and complaints and comments going out to the side. So yeah, I can't wait for that. So if you want to have a little bit more in-depth discussion about it with me or others, the Discord link is also down below. Other than that, please like, and if you have not yet subscribed, do that too. Bye, Whiskers!